U.S. government suffers from terminal Epstein-Barr infection. The U.S. political dialogue of late has been dominated by Mossad pedophile blackmailer Jeffrey Epstein and Bush-era Iran-Contra cover-up artist Attorney General William Barr, and this is probably no coincidence. The choice of Epstein and Barr may well have been a deliberate nod to the Epstein-Barr virus, also known as the mononucleosis or the kissing disease. Epstein-Barr was one of the first viruses engineered by the Nazi faction to cause cancer in targeted victims, according to Japanese military intelligence. In this case, we have a staged public fight between deep state agents Epstein and Barr that seems to be deliberately causing a fatal malfunction in the US political dialogue, as portrayed by the corporate propaganda media. Let us look behind the botched Epstein operation to see if it's actually part of something much more sophisticated. The staging of Epstein's suicide in a suicide-proof jail cell was immediately condemned by Barr, even though it occurred on his watch. Immediately after the suicide, news was released showing that Epstein has a bone broken in his neck that usually only breaks when a person is deliberately strange. Following this, there was an official autopsy result showing that there was a suicide after all. What is interesting about this operation is that opinion polls show that 49% of Americans believe he was murdered, while only 29% believe the official story that he committed suicide. This means that now only a minority of hardcore Kool-Aid drinking Americans believe their government. In fact, Pentagon sources say that Epstein had been allowed to fake his death in exchange for full cooperations in the coming takedown of the over 300 top VIPs who visited his pedophile island. The deliberately botched suicide of Epstein has allowed the Epstein underage sex investigation to be transformed by Barr into a murder investigation, the sources say. This gives the U.S. domestic and military police much stronger powers, they say. Certainly, the staged Epstein death was quickly followed by an FBI raid on Epstein Island. FBI agents on the spot deliberately opened a window to allow a drone to photograph a bloody bed inside the temple of his island. It can be seen at around 2.22 minutes on the video at the link below. We are also getting reports on the US Navy intelligence link information disinformational site Squawka fail that Navy divers have found the remains of children's bones on the sea bottom near Epstein Island. This means the scandal is looking ready to move from VIPs having sex with underage but post-pubescent girls to the ritual sacrifice of children, many of them pre-pubescent. British MI6 intelligence sources warned that the use of Barr as a key person in the Epstein investigation could open it to abuse by German DVD operatives to take down political opponents with trumped-up pedophilia charges. The source notes that Lord Edwin Bulmer, the most senior living officer after the Queen in the British Armed Force, and others recently had their reputations ruined by false pedophile charges. Nonetheless, the same sources agree that the world has facing a satanic enemy. They say, we see Satanism principally as an extremist religious cult like all others, but more so as a compromise and control mechanism for the very highest in the world social order. The same sources also say the Epstein case was a fiasco on a global scale at the highest level of society, in that it will all come out. Also, the Queen's son, Prince Andrew, is implicated, for example, along with everyone else. He should have been treated for his sex addiction and treated properly while in custody. While this British royal sources is clearly nervous about the imminent purge of high-level pedophiles, He does raise the point that Boer was in favor of secret military tribunals when the world is demanding public and fair trials. Also, why arresting high-profile pedophiles is a good thing. We are still not seeing any corporate propaganda media discourse about punishing war crimes like the 11th September or mass murder in places like Iraq and Japan. The other dimension to this threat to the mass arrest of pedophiles is, of course, financial. In a sense, the argument by Washington, D.C. establishment can be boiled down in one dimension. If you bankrupt us, we will arrest you for pedophilia. The increased pressure on pedophiles and people entrapped by Epstein is related to British-led bloodlike attempt to bring legal charges against a large, off-the-ledger liquidity pool connected to EU, say MI6 sources. This is a legal mechanism to control the banking cadre, the source explains, by warning that many have died at the hands of the bankers for trying to use this mechanism. What people need to understand is that bankrupting the five bankers who own Washington, D.C., the EU, and Japan does not threaten the healthy part of these countries, including the non-corrupt bureaucrats and politicians. In fact, bankrupting the bankers would liberate these countries from Babylonian debt slavery, something many in the Western military intelligence would know. The US military is going to remain fully funded throughout the upcoming new campaign to finally bankrupt the political circles in DC and its ringmaster in Tel Aviv and Switzerland. This can be seen by looking at the oil export of the US military protectorate of Saudi Arabia away from the US, which pays with IOUs, to China, which pay cash. According to tankertrackers.com, which tracks oil tanker and shipments based on satellite imagery and the ship's automatic identification system, Saudi Arabia exported a whopping of 1,802,788 barrels per day (BPD) to China in July 2019, up to 19% compared to 921,811 BDP in August of 2018. By contrast, export to the US in July were 262,053 BDP, down nearly 62% from 687,946 BDP in August of last year. The proposal by Saudi Arabia to create $500 billion Massachusetts-sized new country there that circumvents existing taboos against genetically improving human beings and will introduce all sorts of other suppressive technology as well, shows that the US Central Command at least is trying to start a breakaway civilization. The DC establishment, meanwhile, is growing more desperate by the day. Domestically, an increase in the number of mass shooting incidents has run into decreasing return as the public becomes numb to them. An attempt to start false right left state riots in Portland, Oregon has also failed. Following failed regime change efforts meant to steal oil from Venezuela, Syria, Iran, and elsewhere, the DC neocon crowd is now hoping to stave off bankruptcy by buying Greenland from Denmark. They are also trying to destabilize Hong Kong in an effort to get bargaining power with China. The protest there started as a legitimate move by Hong Kong citizens to nullify a law that would allow them to be extradited to China. Hong Kong is populated largely by people who fled communist China, so that law really hit a nerve. However, after China backed down, the protests degenerate into violent action by professional agents, propagators paid by Xenonist, according to Asian secret society sources. The aim is to force China to use excessive force and thus ruin its international image, the CIA sources admit. However, the Chinese learned from the Tiananmen Square protests in 1989 and are using conventional anti-riot strategies like water cannons and the arrest of violent people to keep these protests civil. The Hong Kong move came as Trump as forced by domestic opposition to back down on tariffs against an additional $300 billion worth of Chinese goods. Anybody who knows the real world understands that a bankrupt person who used unpayable debt to buy stuff is not in a strong bargaining position. The people who benefit from distributing cheap Chinese goods in the US understand this. The US is now paying 94% of all global yields as it desperately tries to keep itself afloat. In financial markets, paying more interest than others is a clear sign of deteriorating creditworthiness. The US corporate government has funding through the beginning of September, but there is a growing consensus to push for an actual public bankruptcy for the US corporate government this fall. Needless to say, the DC people have managed to avoid the scenario so far and could well put it off again this fall. However, there's going to be a huge fight this year that might finally pull the plug on the EB-infected Washington, D.C. political circus. Certainly, the Commonwealth, the Vatican, the Russians, and the Chinese, among others, want the Zionist troublemakers put out the business permanently. The Zionists will fight this tooth and nail. Please rest well for the rest of your summer, because this autumn looks likely to be more headache than usual.